Robert Breedlove, welcome to my podcast.
Michaela, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
This should be good, but before we get started, can you give a brief background about who you are and what it is you do?
Sure. My background is in accounting and finance. I'm a former hedge fund manager in the crypto asset space, and then largely influenced by your father's work and the work of some others, I've decided to pivot full time into education. And a lot of my educational efforts are focused on history of money, economics, philosophy, all connected to Bitcoin. So a lot of people in the Bitcoin universe call this the Bitcoin rabbit hole, where you start to ask these fundamental questions like, what is money? What is government? What is value? And it just unearths these layers of understanding the world that you didn't previously have. So that is the name of the show, actually, the What is Money show that I recently just started. And I'm just talking to the smartest people in the world about these topics in typically in a long form setting.
That's very cool. Smartest people in the world to talk about what is money and other topics. That sounds fantastic. Okay, so I guess we should start off first with probably what is Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I guess we could say that Bitcoin is the most superior monetary technology that has ever existed, which naturally segues into the question, what is money? And there's a lot of answers to that question. One of the most basic I like to use is that money is simply a tool for expressing value across space and time. The word tool is a bit loaded because we typically think of a tool as something physical, but money is more of a social construct. And people naturally select a monetary technology that exhibits 5 properties historically. And those are divisibility, durability, recognizability, portability, and scarcity. And to just kind of gloss over some history, historically, before Bitcoin, the best thing we had for money were metals, monetary metals, actually. Gold specifically became dominant because it best exhibited those properties, and of the monetary metals, it was the most scarce. But with Bitcoin, we have a tool that has perfected all of the properties or services we seek in money. Everything that money needs to do, Bitcoin has essentially perfected the deliverance of those properties. So because it's just information, it's infinitely divisible. You can take each Bitcoin and break it down into 100 million subunits called Satoshis. That limit can be increased. If Bitcoin was ever not divisible enough, we could increase that limit. Because Bitcoin's stored as distributed information all over the world, it's effectively infinitely durable. Something kind of like the Bible, actually, where like the individual Bible is clearly not indestructible, but the Bible itself as a book, as a concept, is pretty much infinitely durable because it's everywhere. It's everywhere and nowhere. Bitcoin's infinitely portable because it's just information. You can move it at the speed of light. And then Bitcoin's infinitely recognizable, meaning that you can audit the total supply. You can verify every transaction. You can effectively be your own central bank by running software. And then finally, and very importantly for money, Bitcoin is, as I've argued in some of my writing, the discovery of absolute scarcity. So everything in the world has always been relatively scarce only. Like the more time we allocate towards producing anything, we can produce more of it. Of all of the goods and commodities in the world, gold was the most relatively scarce commodity. That's what gave it this monetary property that caused it to have market value as money. But with Bitcoin, we have perfected that property of scarcity. We have something that is digital and has a perfectly fixed supply. And it's really hard to overstate how big of a deal this is because we've never had anything that we know with absolute certainty the supply is fixed at that amount. In the case of Bitcoin, it's 21 million. So that's a nutshell answer. The Bitcoin is the best money we've ever had. I guess the big thing to understand that a lot of people don't is that money is a technology. We typically think money today, we think it's a a product issued by government, but that's not the case. That's not the truth, actually, is money emerges on the marketplace as a technology, people favoring those properties of money. And then I guess we could get into a bit of how we went from gold to paper money, if you like.
Actually, that would be interesting. But before, I have one question before we get into that, but gold to paper money sounds good. What about the fact that you can't use Bitcoin physically for something? So for gold, you could turn it into jewelry or use it in computers, or you could use it. But for Bitcoin, you can't use it like that. Do you see that as a problem?
Yeah, so everything that trades in the marketplace, its value has two basically functions. So one is utility value, which is what you're describing. You can use it for jewelry, you can use gold in dentistry, you can use it in computers. This is the utility value of gold. And then there's another component of demand for gold that is its marketability or its monetary use case. So when we look at gold's market cap today, say it's around $10 trillion, approximately 1 or 2 trillion of that market cap, which is the total value of gold worldwide, is the demand configuration for its use as a utility, right, in dentistry and computer and all these things. The other $8 trillion of gold's market cap is demand for gold as money, to hold it as a store of value. So this is actually another definition of money. It's like everything exhibits a little bit of monetary premium. Like anything, because you would hold it in anticipation of trading it in the future. So gold is just a thing that's held mostly for its marketability aspect of value. So you could say another definition of money would be that commodity which exhibits the greatest marketability or monetary premium relative to its utility value. So gold was, say, again, 8 to 2, like a 4 to 1, right? Bitcoin has perfected this again by perfecting the properties of money. Bitcoin's pure monetary premium. There's no industrial use to it at all. So you could argue that this is a defect, but Bitcoiners would actually take the position that this is an expression of Bitcoin as a pure money. It's like the first time we've discovered a pure money. This technology is only good as money. It does nothing else. Whereas gold was just kind of this analog version of Bitcoin. We were just doing our best with what we had.
That's interesting. So that's why it's referred to as gold 2.0.
Yeah, digital gold, which is a great analogy, but you have to really understand gold, and not many of us do.
Yes, this is true. Okay. You're talking about gold into paper money. Is that a Bitcoin tattoo? I see it.
My only tattoo is a Bitcoin tattoo. Yeah. Skin in the game is what it means to me.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. You had something for that. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Bitcoin into money. How did that happen? Gold into paper money. How did that happen?
Sure. So historically, people are trading with one another in the global economy. Everyone's operating in their own best interest over time. This is what causes the market to generate prices, right? As people trade against one another, a price emerges for a good. It's constantly changing. It's also what generates innovation. So as an entrepreneur can figure out a better way of doing something, he or she has an incentive to sell that into the marketplace. And that's how we all become more productive and advance. So throughout this long history of people trading against one another, gold was selected as money because it best exhibited those properties. But the shortcoming of gold and monetary metals more generally was in the portability property of money. Mm-hmm. So gold was really good for holding value over time, in that it exhibited reliable scarcity, in that no matter how hard anyone tried to produce gold, it was a commodity whose supply we could increase the most slowly. So if I'm going to park my wealth in something as an entrepreneur, I want to put it somewhere that's maximally resistant to the willpower of other people. Otherwise, people are just going to, if you just put it in copper, for instance, if you monetize copper, people would go out and produce a lot more copper a lot more quickly, and they could dilute the value you had stored in it. So this market process is like a game theoretic discovery process where you're looking for the most scarce thing. So that's gold was selected for that. It's a great tool for storing value over time, but because it lacked portability, it struggled in its ability to express value across space. Right? Gold's heavy, it's physical, it's expensive to secure, it's expensive to move. You need armed guards, you need ships, you need safes, you need banks, all of these things. So the market developed this warehousing function where you could just put your gold on deposit with a warehouse custodian. The custodian would issue paper redeemable for that gold. You could then, entrepreneurs were then free to go into the marketplace and transact in these paper tokens that are redeemable for gold. And they basically monetized. They became as good as gold because they were redeemable for gold. So all of a sudden you had the property of scarcity attached to this paper certificate because it was redeemable for gold, but you also had the portability of paper, right? Paper is very light and easy to move around. And it became even better when we abstracted the paper into electronic form. So that was the purpose of banking. And the purpose of currency is really to increase the transactability of gold, to reduce the transaction cost, to increase the velocity of money, is a term used a lot in economics. The problem, of course, comes that you now have to trust the custodian. Whatever they say, whatever gold they say they have on deposit, they have to be telling the truth. Otherwise, it's a fraud. And those warehouse custodians became banks. Banks became central banks. And as I've argued in a lot of my writings, central banking is the greatest fraud in human history. And that dollar is no longer redeemable for gold at all. It's just a confidence game that's imposed by bureaucrats on market actors. But it's been done in a way that, slowly enough, and there's been enough propaganda, I guess, built up around it that we don't need gold, we don't need monetary scarcity. The government should just be able to control the money supply at will to control the economy, frankly, that people have just forgotten all of this history. And I think it's been pretty disastrous. We came off of gold in 1971, so it was 50 years ago. And as we see today, the world is in disarray in a lot of dimensions, culturally, economically, and I think government has kind of run amok as well.
Kind of run amok. Isn't it strange then that the digital currency, that the big one, Bitcoin, wasn't backed on something like gold to begin with? Or do you think that that's actually an upside? Like, you would have thought that the way things have gone, it would have been created backed by something like gold.
Well, here's the thing about when we say backed by gold, we have to look one layer deeper. Gold itself is backed by energy or proof of work, right? We're looking for a money that we cannot counterfeit. So gold, because it's so hard to produce, the most difficult commodity to get above ground, it is secured by proof of work. Like if you want to go out and harvest the monetary premium that's stored within gold, you have to expend energy, time, resources to go and dig it out of the ground. So in my view, gold is just the analog version of proof of work, which is the consensus and security model for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the same thing, only it's a more direct pathway to monetizing energy. So instead of having to spend energy to go and find gold mine and get it above ground and sell it into the market, you can take Bitcoin mining directly to any energy resource in the world. And you just put this mining rig on top of it. This could be a stranded gas well that's way off grid, that's not economic to sell at all. You can now put Bitcoin mining directly onto that resource and monetize this energy that would have otherwise gone unused. So when we think, I think it's very easy to think like, oh, shouldn't we have backed Bitcoin by gold? But Satoshi actually went a layer deeper. It's like, well, what's backing gold? Energy is what backs gold. So he just directly mapped Bitcoin onto energy.
Although you could argue that the actual physical gold and what you're able to make it into also backs gold. Yeah.
Yeah, you're back to that original debate between utility and marketability. So it's like, do you want a money that does other things, or do you want a money that's a pure money? And if we just look at the judgments of market actors historically, they've always favored the purest money. So the bet on Bitcoin is that that market dynamic would continue to play itself out towards the purest money, and that is Bitcoin.